Hello. Yesterday, I went thrifting and was lucky enough to come across an uncut sewing pattern. Unless you have something very specific you are looking for, browse the thrift stores before you pay full retail price. Of course, check to make sure that it is uncut or that it is cut out in your size. A note on sizing. Measure yourself and use those measurements to check your size, but in general, whatever size you are wearing in like ready to wear clothes, add 10 to get an idea of where you are in sewing patterns. So I usually wear like a 4 to 6, and in this sewing pattern, I'm gonna cut a 14. As a friendly reminder, there is no correlation between the size of your pants and the size of your character. Now that we've got that out of the way, this is the fabric that I plan to use. I did a burn test and determined that it is definitely full synthetic. It didn't burn so much as melt, and the fumes had a sort of gross, sweet chemical smell, and the ash was definitely melted plastic. My guess is probably polyester. I wouldn't buy it new, but I bought it from an estate sale. I think I have about 8 yards here, so definitely enough to make a pants suit. Look at that snow. It is a great day to stay inside and sew. Perhaps I should spare you the boredom of watching me cut out piece after piece of paper pattern. I'm kind of curious why the lady wearing the suit on the pattern in the picture, I want to know why she's so glum looking. Maybe she doesn't like wearing a suit? Right now I am using Taylor's tags to mark where things like the point of the dart is. And when I do this, what I'm doing is I'm using some different brightly colored thread to make a mark, such as that, so that I know where the point of the dart is. It is perfectly acceptable to use chalk or an air off marker or a water off marker or a straight up pencil if you want to. That's up to you. But I like this. I like using thread to mark inside of the circles and whatnot because it's not going anywhere, and it's very easy to, like, I know that this is not going to stain the fabric. It's not gonna like be permanent, show through, and it's also not going to just brush off every time I move the fabric the way that something like chalk would. Thus, I use thread for Taylor's tags. And I'm using orange thread because the fabric that I'm using is black, and I just want something that's really bright and contrasting and makes it really easy to see where my marks are. Sometimes I use different colored thread to denote different types of markings. For example, now I'm using blue thread to mark where the buttonholes are, whereas I use orange thread to mark where the darts are. Now, I'm not going to mark the size of the buttonholes because I haven't decided what buttons I'm using yet. I'm cutting the threads before they pull out of the fabric, so that way the threads are on both sides. We're finally sewing! The first step, of course, is to stitch the darts. So, never backstitch at the point, but what I'm doing here is I'm going back like a couple of stitches and then coming back into the flesh of the dart, I suppose. The part that's on the inside. And then that's where I back tack. Show ya. So this is what the point of the dart looks like. As you can see, there's just a little bit of thread there, and then the back stitching is in the flesh of the dart. Yep. And do that for all 4 darts. It is also 100% completely acceptable to stitch off the point and then tie into a knot. That's the traditional home sewing technique for ending a dart. And then trim the threads. Pressing the darts is essential. I should probably do a separate video all about pressing, but in case you're curious, this is a tailor's ham. And yes, it's vegan. There's no actual ham involved. And this is for pressing darts and princess seams, anything rounded, really. So that's what that's for. And it's kind of essential if you want to do really, really fitted, curvy stuff. So there. Next is to attach the side front to the center front, I suppose. And start by pinning it in place. There will be notches. Here's a notch, and here's a notch. And I will put a pin there. And a notch there, and a notch there. So as you'll see, this area is a little bit bigger than this side. This is where we have to ease. When I have to ease something together, I like to have the slightly larger side on the bottom because I think that's easier because the feed dogs pull it along. And do the same on the other side. Serge the seam and of course do both sides. So I've pinned and pressed the top of the pockets and now I'm stitching it down. By the way, I have a video about how to get around not having a serger for your seam finishes, and this would be a great project to use those techniques on. This, my friends, is a cereal box. I bet you want to know why I'm filming a cereal box. Well, let me show you. This is how I like to make perfect catch pockets. I am eliminating the seam allowance in this case. Yep, I'm cutting it right off. Then come to the machine. Use a large stitch and baste 1/2 inch. Do you know why 1/2 inch? because the seam allowance is 5/8. But we're going to want to not be, we don't want the stitching to show on the outside. Basically, we don't want this basting to show on the outside. Definitely do not backstitch. Right? Then we'll come back over to the cardboard box. And we will use this. Maybe I'll gather the straight edge. This edge over here where the curves are, we don't want to gather that. Okay. Fits right inside there. Okay. And then we take it over to the iron. It may take a little finessing to get it right. And don't be alarmed about ironing the cardboard, because you were probably going to put it in the recycling box anyway, right? A great way to make sure that two of anything are the same is to put one directly on top of the other and check all the way around it. Now we pin the pocket to the front of the jacket. As you can see, I've used tailor's tacks to mark where the pocket goes. I like to put the needle in, take the pin out, and then back stitch just along the edge here. Then pivot and go about 2 or 3 stitches. Pivot again and make a little triangle in this corner. It makes the corners of the pocket a little bit sturdier so that you're less likely to rip them off when you are putting stuff in them. Do the same triangle at the other corner, back tack, and of course do the same thing on the other side. The next step is to sew the center back seam and to sew the side back seams and serge them, or do some other kind of finishing if you're not using a serger. next step is to sew the front and back together at the other seams and the side seams. It is imperative that you match the stitching line rather than just the edges of the fabric, because the edges of the fabric won't necessarily be the same length or whatnot as the stitching line. And of course, after you finish stitching these seams, serge or perform some other seam finish to them. And the reason I forgot to mention that we have to do this is because this is an unlined jacket. This is the undercollar. It is considered best practice to stitch the center seam here and then apply the interfacing. So let's get to that. I suspect that the reason for this is so that you don't have the bulk of the seam being interfaced. In an effort to avoid having a ton of bulk in the seams, you can trim some of the seam allowance off of them. This is going to get fused to the fabric, so you really don't need any, really, seam allowance on these. If you are going to put a tag with your name or your brand name on it, now is a good time to put that on the facing. And a good way to find the center of the back facing is to fold it in half and nip a little V shape. All right. Well, it's very small, but I'm sure you can see it. Then take your pins and you can use that notch to help you center. I like things to be kind of centered and perfect, but if you don't, you could definitely put it crooked if you wanted to. Another common place to put that is the inside of the front, like on the side, but I like center back. It's easy. And then when it's on a hanger somewhere, people can see it. The story behind my brand name, Flairel, rhymes with apparel, is that I strung together some letters that evoke some whimsical energy. I wanted something that no one else was using, so I invented my own word. Flairel rhymes with apparel. The next step is to pin the undercollar to the top of the jacket, the neck edge. that you should match up the stitching line rather than the edge of the fabric. And this is why, because this is where the stitching line is, and that is where the fabric matches. Because sometimes the way that the pieces are shaped makes it so that the edges don't line up when the stitching line does. But it is more important to line up the stitching line, of course, because that's where you are stitching. Obviously. That's what I got to say about that. The next step is to stitch the back facing to the front side facings. Even though this is a facing, I would still serge these seams, especially if you are working with a fabric that is particularly prone to fraying. So yeah, then you serge these seams. Then after that, we are going to serge this whole edge here. Stay stitching a ½ inch from the neck edge of the facing will help prevent it from stretching while you go to sew the upper collar into it. Next up is the upper collar, which is going to be pinned in like this.
The path is gone.
part where it starts to really begin to look like a suit. You pin the facing, the upper collar, the under collar, the body, and pin it all together.
You should know I'm not looking back. The past is gone, your chance is gone. Try if you want, but I won't react. The past is gone.
Here's the 5/8 line. This should line up with that, even though it's kind of hard to see through the fabric. So I have the facing on the top, the body on the bottom, and I'm going to stitch all the way around the area that I pinned. And then, of course, we clip these curves. Like that. All the way around. Every single one of them. I have turned the jacket right side out, and now is a good time to try it on and make sure that you like the way that it fits. And then, of course, we are going to press all this, make it sit down pretty nice. And yeah, if you wanted to make it smaller, this is about the time that you would take it in a little bit at whatever seems to make the most sense for your shape. For me, that would be to take them in probably the back seams. But I actually like the way this fits. I am pleased. So, let's get on with the pressing. Next step is to attach this seam allowance to this seam allowance. So I'm going to pin, and then I'm going to sew them together with the sewing machine. You are welcome to hand tack them if you would like to. That's not what I'm going to do. The next step is to tack the seam allowances of the shoulders of both the outside of the jacket and the inside of the jacket together. I'm going to do that by hand because I think that is easier to do by hand than trying to get that machine foot in there. I have serged the bottom hem edge. If you don't have a serger, you are welcome to turn it under twice or use hem tape, whatever. As long as it looks good on the outside, really. And, oh, the reason that I pin at each seam and then I pin between in that order is to more evenly distribute the fullness. That way there isn't like one big stupid fold. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that. I'm pinning it up and then I'm going to press. And then I am going to hand stitch this hem. Because this is a at least kind of formal jacket. Like this is something that I would consider wearing to an interview. And while you absolutely can stitch it with the machine, it would probably look a little bit more professional to hand stitch it and not have that show on the outside. All right, and now I'm going to press the hem. Also, if you decide that you are going to machine stitch the hem, it is completely optional to stitch all along the top, the like edge of the collar and whatnot. I don't think that would look terrible, especially if you've got it machine stitch the hem. I mean, even if you don't machine stitch the hem, I'm thinking about doing that. It's really all about what you like. But when it comes to like truly like formal businessy stuff, the less like top stitching you have, the more formal it looks. Top stitching tends to be a little bit more casual, but that's not a problem. It's really all about the look you're going for. I do declare one thing I am not a fan of is that this fabric is kind of thin, which means that I have to be very, very careful to take very, like, exactly one thread when I go to hem it. There are lots of videos online that can show you how to hand stitch just about anything you want to hand stitch, and that includes a blind hem. Maybe I will make a whole video about how to do that, but right now I'm just going to give you the basics. Essentially, on the inside of the hem, you'll pick up a single thread if you can. And then you'll stitch to the outside like that. Which I guess is technically the inside of the jacket, but it's like the outside of the hem. It's physics. Yeah. So, single stitch being like a single thread, and then a whole stitch is available out here. Yep, that's pretty much how it goes. So I'm gonna do the whole bottom edge here, and I am not gonna film it because you would be bored to death. The time has come, my friends, to sew the sleeve seam. There should be some easing in the middle between the notches. I have decided to machine stitch the hem. Bonus points, the sleeves are now already right side out. That's the way that they're going to have to be in order to set them. So on the sleeve you'll find a double notch. That indicates the back. And it should have one. I need the other sleeve. Alright, there should be a double notch on the back of the body as well, that you would match that up to. I like to have my seam allowances facing the same direction at the top and the bottom, whenever possible. So here, I have the gathering, not gathering exactly, but like ease stitching that I put in the sleeve cap. We're going to pull a few of these stitches to sort of make it a little, well, you know. I say you know, but maybe you don't know, and that's why you're watching this, but yeah, this is not a beginner project. If you want easy, go back to the pajama video. So doing this will help ease the sleeve into the armhole. Use as many pins as necessary to get it to sit down and behave. Because you're putting a convex shape into a concave space, even though the stitching lines match up, the edges of the fabric absolutely won't. And I think I have said multiple times in this video that you got to make sure that your stitching lines match up more so than the edge of the fabric. Alright, now that I've got it all pinned in, let's sew it. I like to start in the armpit and then go around the top and then come back down to the armpit. And I like to sew with the sleeve on top. Try to avoid having a lot of fullness at the shoulder, if you can, anyway. Yeah, so the reason that I like to have the sleeve on top when I'm sewing is that I can better control exactly where all of the fullness goes and make sure that there aren't any little puckers, wrinkles, any other unsightly annoyances. You'll probably see Miss Molly up there. So the story behind the cat tree is that it's actually very strategic. It's in the window, so she can look out if she wants to, and it is also taller than the table, which means that when she's in the cat tree, she can see the whole table. Therefore, she does not need to climb onto the table. And it actually works. I basically never see her on my sewing table. And then look at the outside. Make sure that you like the way it looks, that you don't see any, as I said, puckers, wrinkles, or unsightly annoyances. And then take it to the serger, or whatever method you're going to do for seam finishing. Well, friends, even professionals fuck up. I made my buttonholes too small. Yeah, it's just not gonna happen. So, I guess I'm gonna see if I can make them longer. Don't know until you try. The other option would be to find smaller buttons, but I was looking through my box of buttons and none of them really like stood out to me as belonging to this suit the way that these do. So, let's see if I can make my buttonholes longer. Guys, it worked. I was actually able to make my buttonholes longer. Like, ordinarily, I would say don't look too close. But, I mean, it's black on black, so from like that far away, you're not gonna see it. Yeah. Alright, let's get on with the pants! If you haven't already done so, now is a good time to mark your darts and your notches and put the interfacing on the yokes. I use the scissors to make a little notch at the top of the dart. And I will fold it so that they match. Darts on the pants are made exactly the same as the darts on the jacket, except in my opinion they're a little easier. And of course, press. I am sewing the front leg to the back leg at the inseam. The next step is to lay out the crotch seam, so you'll have the two fronts and the two backs, and they'll be on top of each other, and you're going to sew that area. And I like to start in the middle, just to make sure that I get that crotch, like the inner inseam and the crotch lined up with each other perfectly. After serging the crotch seam, the next step is to individually serge each edge of the side seams. And the reason is because we are going to press them open, and of course we're going to insert a zipper into the left side. Or the right side. You can put the zipper in whatever side you want, but traditionally it goes on the left side. This is where the pin that I put in becomes important, because this is as far down, or I mean, we're not going to sew this section closed. We're going to start sewing here. So I'm going to put another pin in there just to hold it in place, and then we'll sew. Next is to sew the front facings together at the right seam. So let's see. This one's the front, so it goes on me like that. This is the right seam, which lines up with this one. This is the one we sew. One of the ways that I like to make sure that I'm doing things to the correct side, etc., is to literally think about the garment as I'm wearing it. If something's got to go on the left, I think, okay, this is the front, and it goes on me like this, and that's the left side. That's how I like to keep things in track. I have pinned the yoke to the pants, and I'm going to stitch it in place now. I would not worry too much about serging inside of the yoke because it's going to be encased inside of the facing, so don't worry too much about that. Do, however, make sure that you have all of the fullness evenly distributed, etc. As I've said many times, make sure that you follow the stitching line and not the edge of the fabric, because these are curved pieces, so the stitching line is shorter than the edge of the fabric. This is the left side opening where the zipper is going to be. I have pressed this open, the seam, and also pressed this, the opening, 5/8. I have pinned the back side of the zipper, like the part that's on the back of the pants, to the seam allowance with the pressed edge close to the teeth, and I'm about to baste. Also, if you haven't switched to the zipper foot yet, now is a good time to do that. And now I am basting the other side, but closer to the edge of the fabric. The edge of the zipper tape is on the edge of the fabric. going to pull the zipper head, the zipper pull back to the top so that it's out of my way. By the way, I am basting right now. I am not stitching into place. Doing so makes it a lot easier to take it back out if you screwed up. Which, I don't do lapped zippers very often, so there is actually a possibility that I will screw this up. I'm pleased with the location of my zipper, so I'm going to stitch down the smaller side of it. And I'm going to switch my zipper foot to either side, and I am going to top stitch the lap. Hello, friends. I had to hurry up and finish the pants because I wanted to wear them to an interview. So, yeah. I bet you'd like to see the whole suit. So let's go. The suit. So, I like that it has pockets. It's sunny out, guys. Come into this area. So, something that I am not crazy about is all of this. So there will be a video coming soon about how to fix this problem. But other than that, I am quite pleased with it. Here's the side zipper. Goes up and down.